Yeah, I've got a couple different groups that were interested in watching, so I never heard back from Metro, so I'm not sure if they.
Do you send it to a person there or just to their main address or?
I sent it to Teresa,
Oh, okay.
Jarek Schumacher.
Sh Schonecker?
Yeah, he gave me her contact information, so from what I could tell on my phone, we're live.
All right then. Hmm.
So we'll pop over, I'll introduce you, and go from there.
Sounds good.
All right, we're live, and tonight we've got John Wetter from Spotter Network on. He's the president of Spotter Network right now, so he will be giving a rundown of what's going on and a little bit about him, and hopefully everybody finds this educational. I know there's a couple different groups out there tonight paying attention and following along, so without further ado, I will turn it over to John Wetter with Spotter Network. Welcome, John.
All right. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me tonight.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, I guess what I'll do first is kind of give everybody a little bit of a background, first of all, of what Spotter Network is, how we work, what we do. Try not to make any assumptions around what people know or don't know about the organization. And sometimes I find out some folks had some assumptions about the organization that are definitely not in where we're at. So, I guess first a little bit about me. I've been the president of Spotter Network for somewhere around 12 years now, I believe. Spotter Network was founded in 2006 by Tyler Allison of AllisonHouse.com. So if you know Allison House from the data services for weather, that's who originally founded Spotter Network. And then he had a lot of different things going on, got a new job that he knew was going to take too much of his time to be able to really put what he thought needed to be put into Spotter Network. So he asked me to come on as president, recommended me to the board of directors at Spotter Network, and they voted to approve me as president, and so I have been ever since. So a little bit background about me, personally, live in the northwest corner of the Twin Cities area here, and kind of grew up I'm a farm kid, grew up on a dairy farm in central Minnesota. Went to St. Cloud State University for meteorology degree with a minor in political science and mathematics. Currently, my day job, Spotter Network is just a volunteer gig, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But my day job is as the director of IT for a fairly large organization in the West Metro. My staff is responsible for all of the device management, cybersecurity, everything else for organization. We manage about 9,500 devices. So just shy of 10,000 devices that we are charged with managing. And that is really my day job. Outside of that, I still very active in weather. I love meteorology. I love the weather. Just everything about it. I love the challenge of it. I think it takes a certain kind of person to be able to be really involved in weather and like really get weather because you're constantly being challenged, and every time think you got something figured out, you get shown very quickly that you do not know everything about it. So that's probably one of my favorite things about the weather. You know, I think that's probably the fable that people like to continually tell is, about meteorologists is, you get to be wrong half the time and collect your full paycheck, I guess. But we know that the numbers simply don't support that fable. That's why I call it a fable. But yeah, that's a little bit of my background. That's a little bit of kind of what brought me to this. Certainly a computer science background, meteorology background. Smash them together, and storm chasing and spotter network is, I guess, the outcome on that. So I've been storm chasing ever since 1997, personally. So, what, 29 years of storm chasing? Wow, that's a big number. I guess I
Oh,
wasn't expecting that.
oh, I know.
Um,
When I did my class with last Skyward class, and I realized it was like 25 years ago when I did my first one. So I hear you. When
yep, yep. Yeah, and so then, I'm still involved for many years from 2006 to about 2018. I was the coordinator of Skywarn operations for the National Weather Service in Chanhassen. So I ran all of the ham radio operations for the National Weather Service in Chanhassen and helped build out kind of the hub and spoke system that a lot of people know of today. For Minnesota and Western Wisconsin, the all of the 54 counties that Chanhassen serves. So that background, and then coming into Spotter Network has really been helpful in making sure and understanding what the weather service needs from spotters. How do we actually get all of that information? How do we make sure that you know what we're doing is really helpful? Sometimes folks think they're being helpful when really it is not helpful information, and so that's why we ask people to keep coming to Skywarn classes every couple years and get that continuing training, because yes, the science changes. Yes, what we're looking for changes. When I first attended a Skywarn class back in 1997, oh gosh, the first time I attended a Skywarn class was probably in the mid 90s at some point, early 90s maybe. And back then it was they wanted every wall cloud. They wanted to hear all the wall cloud reports. They wanted to hear all the hail. They wanted to hear all the wind. But as the science has improved, as we've learned more about storms, that's why, kind of the new guidance is really only wanting to hear about rotating wall clouds. Making sure that we're really looking for that threatening weather. That's why we made that move in Spotter Network several years ago, that you can only report rotating wall clouds. We wanted to narrow that scope of what Spotter Network is doing into really the information that's useful for the National Weather Service. So then bringing that all into Spotter Network, Spotter Network is a nonprofit organization. We are a registered 501(c)(3), and we have a board of directors. We have our advisory committee. So kind of to talk about what the structure of Spotter Network is. We are 100% volunteer organization. None of us make any money out of Spotter Network. It's frankly quite expensive to operate. So we do ask for donations. You know, Usually we get people will throw us a few bucks, when they sign up or something like that. So I always appreciate a few donations. It helps to disperse at least some of the costs of running the organization, which Spotter Network is an organization now of over 85,000 people that actively use Spotter Network. We have over 100,000 accounts with Spotter Network, but really about 85,000 of those see at least some activity every year. Sometimes people really just think of Spotter Network is how you get the red dots on your radar scope screen. So that's if that's what you're really looking for, that's fine. We certainly hope that if you're out spotting or chasing, that you have Spotter Network running so we can see where you are. We can see reports, sending reports via Spotter Network goes straight to the National Weather Service. So um, that's really the fastest way to get reports to the National Weather Service is through Spotter Network. Um, Several offices, I know quite a few offices that will also, if they see you on Spotter Network near a storm that they're wondering about, wondering what's going on. I'm seeing some interesting things on radar. What does it actually look like in person? Um, they'll call spotters. That's why we ask for your phone information. That's why we ask for that information is to provide that to the National Weather Service. So here you can see our board of directors as well as our advisory committee and our National Weather Service liaisons. One thing people may not know or understand, we are the only organization that has a formal memorandum of understanding with the National Weather Service to provide training and reports to the Weather Service. So really you can see when you look through our advisory committee, we really want to have a good wide range of folks in here. You can see meteorologists, you can see researchers, you'll see private meteorologists, you'll see technical folks, you'll see emergency management, even firefighters and retired firefighters, wanting to have those folks involved. So we are pulling those perspectives together to make sure that Spotter Network is meeting the needs of people who we need to meet. So that's kind of the big overview, and I apologize for my raspy voice tonight. 'Tis the season. I had a brief cold last week, and I've been coughing and raspy voice ever since. So welcome to Minnesota in January, I guess. So that's a quick kind of the quick rundown of what Spotter Network is. I don't know, Justin, if you've got any questions or, we can start diving into some specifics here as well.
Okay, yeah, I think you covered a lot of, gave me some information I didn't know. I know, like, some of my groups I help with Brown County MN Storm Spotters, and last year we did a Skywarn training, got people trained for the first time, and I just figured something like this would be good to help people that are starting out have more information of how to use it, what it is, stuff like that. And I guess I didn't know Allison House was what started this. I use Allison House on my GR level 3 all the time. And then you brought up the dots on the screen. I had to
Hmm.
chuckle a little bit because when I post like screen shares and stuff, that's the most common question asked are, what's the little dots? And I know with South Central Minnesota Skyward and the Ham group on Mankato, we
Yep.
use those dots a lot to help track where everybody's at and making sure everybody's staying safe. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and you think about the connectivity changes that have happened since Spotter Network started back in 2006 to here we are in 2026. Um, you know, wireless internet, and cellular is basically ubiquitous at this point. Like, yep, we all know there's still some dead spots every once in a while, but overall, it's found itself to be incredibly reliable, especially at the onset of severe weather. We certainly know that we need, in many response to, in kind of response to disaster situations, ham radio still definitely plays a very important role, like you mentioned there with a couple ham radio groups. I also am a ham radio operator. I'm K0WDJ. So that's I got my start in ham radio working with Stearns County Skywarn while I was in college, and so I think I joined Stearns County Skywarn I think in 1998 when I was my second year up at St. Cloud State. And Stearns County has a kind of um, a little bit of an unusual relationship, whereas the county emergency management actually runs their Skywarn organization. Yes, many Skywarn organizations work very closely with their emergency management, but it's usually kind of an adjunct piece. It's a group of volunteers that work closely with them. Many Skywarn volunteers, just as ham radio operators, many folks are usually involved in CERT or some, maybe even Aries. Excuse me. But we've really found that for Spotter Network as a internet required service to do that is, really the resiliency around it has been fantastic. So that's been really great to see. And now it just keeps getting better and better. And yeah, to that point of, Tyler Allison with Allison House started Spotter Network, and Allison House is still donates the resources for Spotter Network to actually run.
Oh, nice.
So it actually runs thanks to Allison House, which you think about the actual horsepower that it takes to run Spotter Network is significant in the summer with all of the people chasing and all of the information coming through back and forth. The number of people pulling the feeds as well as the number of people pushing data up to Spotter Network becomes a very costly endeavor. It's a cloud service hosted that requires several tiers of infrastructure for it to run properly. So, as far as the red dots, yeah, it's an important piece. It's really how the service works is having that location information. I'd say the number one thing, if you're just getting started with it, certainly the easiest way to send information is and to send reports is using Radar Scope. So they're a partner of ours. We work very closely with the Radar Scope team. They're fantastic folks to work with. Always have been huge supporters of Spotter Network, as they also report MPing. So you can send reports through MPing or Spotter Network on your mobile device. So, you don't even have to have a laptop. When I started chasing, that was basically the only way to chase is, your a laptop on like a dash mount with a, gosh, back in those days, it was a really wonky cellular to set up or direct connected to your phone, or you would have, I'd go all the way back into the early days of analog internet actually dialing in to an internet connection while you're chasing. I don't know if anyone even actually has a concept of what that would look like anymore. Up to nowadays, chasing with, well, at least for me, and several other chasers having, a mobile air card or a MiFi or something that's feeding into your laptop, maybe even that's doing a workload sharing with a Starlink dish on your roof. Lots of ways to get data nowadays and get it where anywhere. So, let's see. Um, to get started in Spotter Network, it really is a pretty pretty straightforward way. Which some it's funny. I get emails every once in a while from folks that saying like, "How do I get involved?" I'm like, "Yep, just click the get involved." I'm like, "Yeah, but there's only like three things to do." I'm like, "Yep, there's only three things to do to get involved with Spotter Network. You got to register. You have to do some sort of a client, whether download the Windows client, use Radar Scope on your iPhone, iPad, or Android, or Radar Live will actually receive information. They don't send information. But yeah, that's how easy it is to get going on that. Then you need to take some training. So we have online coursework, which if you've done a Skywarn class before, it's essentially the same. This is a version of a national Skywarn class. Our MOU with the National Weather Service requires that anyone that reports through us takes the training. You need to pass the tests with a satisfactory score, but really, again, not hard. We're not trying to do this to get into the um, you know blocking people or in trying to put roadblocks into people being helpful. So, but hey, as we know with Skywarn classes, and if you've been in front of a storm, there's some things you need to know. It's the kind of the three principles of education that I always want to think about. Number one, let's be safe. Number two, let's have some fun while we're doing this. And number three, let's make sure we learn something. So we pull all of those principles together into whether it's Skywarn class, whether it's Spotter Network. It's really the same makeup, really the same thing. And that is frankly how easy it is to get started. Like I mentioned up front, the my recommendation for sending reports really is via radar scope. Um, by far the tightest integration we have because they work really closely with us. So, um, for your types of reports, for your everything else, that's really what we're looking at. The other piece that, sometimes people think about or don't understand, and this is part of the training. Maybe if you haven't taken the training in a while, it's a good thing to take a look back at our minimum reporting criteria. We want to hear obviously all tornado reports and rotating wall cloud reports. Um, we want to make sure we have that information. Those are obviously the things, the hey, we need to know right now type of things. So that's really what we look at there. And you know, criteria as far as that goes nationally, we want to hear all hail. I know some offices locally have said they only want to hear about bigger hail, but we still, from a national perspective, there again, different thing is a national lens. Quarter size hail in Wichita, Kansas, is a very different normal from, let's say, you know, Portland, Oregon. You know, quarter size hail is going to have a very different impact and a very different, I guess, sociological impact. Just it's not common out, especially out west, or maybe in the Northeast. Like in like Caribou, Maine, or something like that. A nickel-sized hail report would be a big deal there because it doesn't happen there very often, or maybe even in Florida where it's usually so warm through the atmosphere that you don't often get hail there. So thinking there from a national standpoint, that's where we're thinking about that. Hydro, and now this has had a little bit of controversy, I guess, in some of the chaser community with us really limiting our flooding reports and our flash flooding. And that's another piece of where the National Weather Service is also wanting to narrow that down a little bit. We're wanting to really think about what are we reporting and how much information are we putting into the system? Is everything we're putting in the system useful and helpful information? So with that, we restrict the flash flooding reports to really mean that there should be include active impacts. We want to hear what it's doing, not just that there's water. And when we see water, we want there to really be a 4-inch minimum depth. And remember, for flash flooding, the definition is it's moving water. So we all think about whatever, whether we live in the country or whether we live in the city. Um, I think just about any of us can name a town nearby where, yep, when it rains hard for a little bit, there's that spot that the water just backs up. It pools at whatever the intersection or the, The storm sewers just aren't good enough. That is not what we're looking for in any of this. That those are not the reports that we're looking for, and really making reports of that really is adding a pretty significant amount of noise into the system. So I would ask folks to just really think about when you're making reports, you know, what do you expect, I guess, as an outcome of that report? If it is a subsevere report, great, as long as it's, the any hail. But otherwise, for flooding, like, yep, we know that, as far as from severe convective storms, flooding is the number one cause of deaths and injuries. And so, the number one death and injury creator is heat. But the number one thing for thunderstorms is you know flooding. So, and those numbers are going up. So as even, with turn around, don't drown is the saying, the mantra we've all heard probably. Our number of deaths annually from flash flooding is continuing to rise. It's really one of the only areas where we're still seeing this continued rise in deaths. And we've really got to talk about that as a society, I think. Certainly, if you've got true story, if you've got kids getting ready to drive soon, you need to make sure you're having that conversation with them at some time of like just because the road was fine driving to your friend's house or driving into practice or whatever, if there's water over the road coming home, that doesn't mean that the road is still there underneath it. And I know that sounds like that probably sounds a little bit like a the sky is falling proclamation, but the numbers just frankly, unfortunately support it. We're seeing more and more injuries and deaths occur from flash flooding. So, um, yeah, that's as we look at it there. Then we also want to hear any reports for notable damage. We're not looking for like leaves down. We're really looking for like branches down. And if it is a branch, we need to know the diameter and is it a healthy tree? Um, if you've owned a house long enough, you probably know that tree in the backyard and that one limb that you're like, yeah, the next storm, that's probably going to come down. Well, that's not the type of stuff we're looking for, whether it be Spotter Network or whether it be Skywarn. We're really looking for substantial damage and wanting to know what that looks like. So, let's see. Then, I guess the last note there of the minimum supporting criteria is we certainly are interested within tropical reports of the above. So tropical, whether it be hurricane, whatever, not reportable themselves, but all of the above pieces are. Thing I'll mention, I skipped over a little bit just because I wanted to come back to it after the other pieces, is wind. And that's the big thing is only measured wind speeds of greater than 50 miles an hour. So we're not looking for, furniture, the patio furniture being rearranged. We're not looking for the gas, the trash cans going down the street. We're really looking for 50 miles an hour or better, which usually is the threshold where you start to see impacts. We know that severe thunderstorm is defined by winds of 58 miles per hour or greater. That's the 65 knots. So that's what we're really looking for there and getting that information. So that's what we want to hear in Spotter Network. There's a whole list of what not to report. And this is just trying to be thorough for folks. I think some people maybe view this as like some sort of a proclamation or something. But really it just comes from experience and again, wanting to make sure that the reports coming in to the Weather Service, the reports that we're getting, are useful. to the warning process. If you've gone to a Skywarn class, you know the three ingredients into a warn or no warn for a storm are the environment. So, what's going on in the environment? You know, your thermodynamic profile, your cinematic profile. You know what the shear is, and all of those pieces. The second piece is your radar and satellite, kind of your sensors that you have out there. What do the storms look like? What do they, how are you able to sample them? And then the third part of that is spotter reports. And so they're again putting more noise into either one of those kind of forecast funnels, can really stop it up, you know. So that's I guess why I call that out. You know, I think some of the things that are pretty clear here, you know, that we still have folks try to pass off as severe every once in a while is, you know, lightning reports, fog reports. For a while, we were having a lot of people put in like heat reports. So just looking at all the pieces, that's where we really want to take a look at that. Also, a significant thing for Spotter Network is we do not take winter weather reports anymore. We stopped taking weather reports in 2022, and again, this was at the request of the Weather Service because of the build out of both Coco Ross and MPing. Having those both in place, and with Coco Ross to report through them, you also need to have the Coco Ross training because we don't want snow reports from necessarily just random and we don't know what's under it. We really are looking for those high quality snow reports, you know, off of a snowboard. You know, MPing report is a great way to still be able to get some of those reports in as well if they're not severe or it's not a big event. So,
Should,
then I guess the next thing that I'll mention is with the reports that go in, they're then you saw the whole advisory board. Those folks are then also do grading of reports. We want this to be an educational feedback. We want people to understand the reports that they sent in, how that they are helpful, or get a correction to help make them better in the future. This isn't like a trying to lecture you, or this is not trying to put you down in some way. This is really meant to be educational and trying to say like all of us always have something to learn, you know. I've been involved in the meteorology field now for, you know, over 25 years, and I still have plenty to learn. You still see what a storm does and you go, "Huh, all right, that's not what I was expecting." Or you see an environment, you know, just like every once in a while you get, you know, an enhanced or a moderate risk day or something, and it ends up being you know, you want to play sad horn, you know, wah, 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 total bust. Even sometimes it's clear sky bust.
hey John,
Still plenty to learn. Yeah.
I'm looking at my timer. It's telling me my main's getting in about a minute and a half. If I
All
lose
right.
you, I'll send you another link right away. We'll pick back up and
Okay.
um, yeah. Then I do have a couple questions we'll get to towards the end here.
Sounds good. Yeah. So as I was just kind of finishing the grading here, maybe I'll finish that up and then we'll break and come right back. So we really try to get every, you know, grading for all of the reports that are turned in. We know, you know, we wanna give that feedback. So the only way for you to get like blocked on the system is to turn in multiple reports that have at least three reviewers put it down as a low quality report. So, which really is a just a bad report. And usually it's because you know, sent something in from the not allowed list. So, you get an email every, I think it's Tuesday morning, if I remember right. with any reports that you've sent in over the last week, along with those grades. So that's kind of the quick and dirty of the kind of get starting in Spotter Network. And then we can come back and kind of pick up some of the questions and maybe go into what it looks like in GR and in radar scope for folks here as well.
Sounds good. Oh, there it went. All right, folks, hold on a second. I just lost it, so I got to restart here. John picked that one up. Hit that one just at the right time. Um, I guess I have to wait a few minutes before it will let me fire up another meeting. So uh, I'm gonna cut the stream for now. Once we get John back, I'll get it back up. I'll see if I can find a new method that isn't gonna require this. So I'll be back with the stream in a few minutes.